Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Stanisci, and this is CFL Talk, 50 minutes of talking football. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV Channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Don't forget to subscribe to Candid Stanisci 1030 on YouTube. Now on CFL Talk, as usual, is David Morassutti, Mr. Sportsnet, Mr. Every kind of sport conversation you want to have. David's ready, willing, and completely able to have the conversation. Leaf season ended, so now we're concentrating on the Toronto Argonauts and, of course, the Canadian Football League. I guess the most important news, David, has to be they signed somebody that tried in the NFL, didn't quite make it, and he was a key component to their defense.
Yeah, it was something we were kind of waiting to see. We knew that Jamal Peters was being released from the Atlanta Falcons when he did sign there. And while everyone was just like, all right, it's tough to see him go, there was also the thought of, if he doesn't stick around, we'll definitely bring him back. When I was looking at this Argos team going into the season, cornerback was a position I was a little concerned about. Now you bring back an all-star, you know, defensive back who led the league in touchdowns. Those questions kind of subside a little bit. I'm sure the Argos defensive coaches were doing a few happy dances when they saw that news today.
Well, let's be clear. When it comes to the Toronto Argonauts and when it comes to their plan defensively, there's a lot of rotation going on, which implies and in fact is a challenge and requires learning curves, right? While he was their best defender, there's a learning curve you don't have to go through.
Yeah, I know for sure. And, it's something that every CFL team has to go through when they're bringing in new players every year, right? Like the amount of roster turnover, new schemes that these players are going into. Yeah, some of these players have played in similar schemes before, but the language is different. Communication, learning tendencies is another thing too. So they always say that defensive players tend to get themselves more acclimated quickly just because on defense the verbiage and you know everything's kind of the same, right? A zone blitz is a zone blitz, man coverage is man coverage, right? It's a little easier to get that stuff worked out. So I think the Argos had this inkling that this could be a possibility, and they were leaving that opportunity a little bit, just to make. I don't know how. I mean, some people were asking me about the salary cap with that. I don't think Jamal Peters is commanding a massive salary, right? I don't know how it works because he was released and they had to sign him back, but I don't know if it because he was still technically under his rookie deal. I don't know if that plays a factor too. So I don't think there's any issues with that. The Argos did retain his rights when they did release him. That they were smart to do that because now they get their top cornerback, and just in time that they can get him ready to go, if probably ready for him to play in week in their first game.
Yeah, part of their Grey Cup winning team. And we already know that what happens when a team wins a championship is they lose a few of their players, and those players are a part of a obviously a cohesive unit that's successful. And it's a lot easier to continue being successful if you have continuity in your lineup. We've talked about this many times. And, Peters is a key component to their defense, and therefore their defense can be as good. And if not, the irony here is they had Winton McManus not playing in the Grey Cup. And while, I think it's fair to say in the backfield, definitely Peters was their best player. But I beg to suggest that Winton McManus was probably the best defender they had, and he didn't play in the Grey Cup.
Yeah, I think the best way to say it is Win McManus was their best player, but Jamal Peters might have been one of their more crucial players, right? They had so much depth at linebacker. Like when we had Mike Hogan on last week, and if you hadn't had a chance, make sure you go and listen to that. he brought up some of the other guys. We bring up all the guys that are on this year, and Mike like he listed off another 3 or 4 guys right after. There's a little more depth there in linebacker. You can have someone plug in that hole. Cornerback's totally different. It's such a tough position, especially in the CFL. These guys don't get a. These guys have to take on receivers who get a running start. Like that's not an easy thing for a cornerback to have to defend against. And so, I think the Jamal Peters one, it's big. Looking at teams that they're going to look to have to beat this year, you're going to need that number one cornerback. And you know what, in the CFL, it's not just being able to defend the pass, but to make turnovers. How many games did the Argos win because Jamal Peters made a crucial interception? I can think of one game where he had 3 against a certain team that Argos fans have a bitter distaste for, right? Without him having 3 interceptions in that one game, I don't know if the Argos win that game. That's how much of a game changer he can be on that defensive game on that defense. When McManus, of course, steady under the radar in a way until you hear the rumblings. Oh, he's leading the league in tackles. He's doing this. He's just steady. He's like making the steady plays, and sometimes those go a little unnoticed.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go over the games that were played last week, and we started with our first CFL game, and it was BC in Calgary. BC wins it 25-15. Um, I expected more from Calgary in this game. Not that I expected less from BC. I got what I expected from BC, but I expected a little more from Calgary. It seemed to me that for some unknown reason, something I didn't expect was that they came out flat.
Yeah, like with Calgary, the one thing they didn't do, and I was a little surprised about, they didn't establish the run as much as I expected them to. Like Kadeem Carey and Payne Logan were well over, like they were averaging well over 6 yards. Payne Logan, I think, had over 11 yards a carry. Kadeem Carey was just over 6. The problem was, BC got off such a hot start. Vernon Adams was doing so well off the start that if like Calgary was just felt like they had to go to the pass. But the best way to go up against a high-powered offense like BC is to keep them off the field, give the defense a chance to rest. The best way to do that: long drives, get your running game going. And Calgary, surprisingly enough, didn't really do that, and I'm very surprised. Um, and you just saw their offense looked so off. Like Jake Mayer looked it looked like he had never thrown to his receivers, right? You look at
You know how we talk about establishing the
yes.
passing game by the success of the run. The lack of passing game hindered their run. I think it was almost like that.
Well, like the one that perplexed me was Malik Henry. Like he had 3 receptions for 28 yards. He was targeted 8 times. And like someone will say, okay, well, there's some tough plays. There were some big drops that Malik Henry would not have dropped, in last year. Like at least one for sure touchdown that would have made this an even closer game. But the fact that you only score 3 points in the first half, your offense wasn't able to establish the passing game as you mentioned. I think this also has to do with the fact that offense is lacking some depth at receiver. They're lacking a little bit of that game breaker. Like Malik Henry is supposed to be that guy, and he wasn't, and it was a letdown. It was a letdown in a lot of ways for Calgary.
I totally agree, and now that there is no Bo Levi Mitchell to lean on or to inspire, we're getting an idea of the mayor and what his constituency can expect. I think he needs to settle into being the number one quarterback. The only quarterback on the sidelines of consequence. It's all about confidence, I think, David. And he did not look confident out there. At times, even when they showed him after a play, he looked perplexed. Those are really big shoes that he's got to fill. The departure of Bo Levi Mitchell is an era. 10 years of Bo Levi Mitchell was not, something that was just unnoticed. I mean, we're talking 2 Grey Cups. We're talking about one of the best quarterbacks in Calgary history. Moving on, so hopefully for Calgary and Calgary fans, there will be an adjustment made now, and this was just one of those things that happens. You know, I use the term learning curve or adjustment. I guess we can add for that team adjusting with the departure of Bo Levi Mitchell and Meyer becoming the guy that he's supposed to be, their leader, because that's what quarterbacks are.
Yeah, it's one thing for Jake Mayer to assume the starting quarterback role. It's another to do it when you don't have that veteran presence of Bo Levi Mitchell around. Yeah, he probably Bo Levi Mitchell, as much as he wanted to play, he could at least help the team in a lot of ways to, kind of be that other coach, that other voice for Jake Mayer. And, I look at what Calgary did here. Yeah, it was eventually time to move off. Financially too, there was going to be that sacrifice needed to make, right? But I also think with Calgary, you know, they haven't really done many favors for their inexperienced quarterback to kind of give him the weapons he needs. Like I think back to when Bo Levi Mitchell, yeah, the quarterback can make the weapons good too, and I think that there's a little bit of that. I can't say that Jake Mara is free of any blame, but I look back at what Calgary used to have offensively and what they have now, and I just don't know if that's going to be enough, especially when you're ushering an experienced quarterback. So they got to figure that out. BC's let's not forget BC, as good as they were offensively last year with Nathan Rourke, their defense was very underrated in my
Oh,
opinion.
absolutely. It was the one thing they had going for them the past few years. The only thing they were missing, if we all remember when Riley arrived there, it wasn't that they needed a quarterback. They had a quarterback. They had no offensive line. They always had the defense, even when Riley was there a few years ago before the pandemic, taking all those beatings. Yeah, the defense for BC's always been a good one. They've had a really good defense, and the team became really good when an offense entered into the equation. And nothing helps an offense better than a good defense. And they have, while their offense, might not scare any of us or anyone out there that's playing them. Adams is a big play quarterback. He's a guy that can make things happen quickly, rapidly, instantly. And that's a great asset, his mobility back there. So what you end up with is while the offense is on the field, they're being productive. And then the defense is on the field, they're being destructive. And Calgary actually didn't have I'm not going to say they had a bad defensive evening, but it wasn't the kind of Calgary defense that, it sounds like we're tearing down Calgary. Calgary just was flat. Their offense or defense, it wasn't what we're used to. That's all I'm getting at. I think that's all I can say without sounding negative. I hope they just weren't. Both phases were not that impressive. Even their special teams wasn't impressive. They usually have a pretty good running game, a kick return game, right? It wasn't that impressive. There was nothing really. They're very flat. It seems that's the word I'm going back to each time.
Yeah, and I think if we know Dave Dickinson, that standard is not going to fly. He
And
right, and I think no, this is his first year of being promoted,
as GM,
right, and so there's a learning curve there in that regard, but I do think you bet on the fact that he's been in this situation before. Calgary, yeah. I guess the benefit is that there's lots of time in the season to kind of get things going. But yeah, you have to hope that for his sake, this is not something that's going to become a trend for the year.
I don't think so either. Jake Meyer was limited to 160 yards. That tells you enough right there. That's not a Calgary offense that we're accustomed to.
Mhm.
Not generating that kind of offense. We'll walk by the Hamilton Winnipeg game because our scheduled guest hasn't arrived, and or I hope he's okay. Bubba Smith. Ticats TV. We're hoping to have him on and talk about the Ticats, especially because they'll be playing in our first game that we go to BMO Field to cover the Toronto Argonauts. It'll be an interesting conversation with him moving forward with Bo Levi Mitchell, getting an up close version of what's going on there. So our next game is the Montreal Alouettes defeated the Ottawa Redblacks 19-12. In this game, David, I was impressed, with with Fajardo as the quarterback for Montreal. But you know what really impressed me, even in the loss, was the incredible tenacity and effectiveness of the defensive line for the Ottawa Redblacks.
Yeah, and like that was something that Ottawa could hang their hats on. That it's a very good defensive front. It's just the problem was the defense would get so tired because the offense wasn't doing anything, right? The offense was struggling so much. But a lot of people were wondering, is this Montreal taking what was going on in Saskatchewan and bringing that over to Montreal with allowing all the sacks, or was this Ottawa, really being really good on the defensive end? And I think it's probably a mixture of both in a lot of ways. I think, again, a lot of new changes in Montreal, new offense being installed. So there's going to be some learning curves there.
New head coach.
New head coach. But I still think like Ottawa's defense is something that, you're going to have to watch throughout the year. Like it's a good defensive group that they have there. Unfortunately, it's the offense. I've always said it's never been the defense I was ever concerned about with Ottawa. If you look at it, it's always going to be that offense.
Yeah, the fans, you could hear them moaning, Arbuckle. He wasn't that effective. He's their quarterback right now only because Mazzoli has 2 games to sit yet to recover from his leg injury.
Mhm.
So he's out another 2 weeks. He's a placeholder, and he played like a placeholder. The days of him being in Calgary looking like the guy that could emerge as out of Bo Levi Mitchell's shadow. I don't think there's a player that was affected more by his growth curve by the pandemic more than him. He was ready to fly, and then the pandemic happened. He was on his way to Ottawa. No, wait, Toronto. Oh, no, wait, back to Ottawa. That can't be easy for a young man, who's trying to develop skills. But he just did not look comfortable in the position.
No, he didn't. And this has been an issue, as you mentioned, ever since he left Calgary. He has not looked like the same quarterback. And it's made some wonder, is it the system that was really good for him, or is it a confidence issue, mental part of the game? Because yeah, like the 3 interceptions, the efficiency rating was just not that good. And again, like they tried to establish a run. I'll give them that. They attempted to take the ball out of his hands a little bit there, and it just wasn't happening. But let's also not forget that this is a team that's a little banged up. They don't have all their horses there. I was a little surprised Jalen Acklin wasn't as good, but I also just think that this is offense is more tailored for Jeremiah Masoli than it is for Nick Arbuckle.
You're right about Acklin. I mean, in the past, since 2019, he's the second or third best receiver statistically.
Yeah,
So yeah, you expect him to do a little bit more. Absolutely.
exactly, right? That's kind of he was really good for them last year despite not really having a great quarterback with him, right? He was I just think that when if you're Ottawa, yeah, you say we could try to weather the storm here until Mazzoli gets back, but man, like you just don't know you just don't know how long that's going to be, and you don't know which version of Jeremiah Mazzoli you are going to get when he comes back, and how much you can rely on him to stay healthy. Because if he's not 100% now, like that's something that's going to kind of feel you're gonna definitely feel that all year long. So I think, like, look, Nick Arbuckle, he has to flush this performance and do what he can to regroup for the next game.
And the unnecessary throws that he made. I mean, there were 3, I think, if I counted right, there were 3 throws that he shouldn't have made. That he basically he was throwing jump balls, and and I don't know. I just don't see that as being part of a game plan. That's kind of desperation's, speaking loudly and taking control of your game management. I just, like I said, this is a guy that was supposed to be the up and coming guy, rising out of the shadow of Bo Levi Mitchell. I hope he, it works out for him. And as far as Mazzoli's concerned, um, you know, I, he has had problems with injuries. We know that. Um, what we don't know is um, how he looks in a system that the Ottawa Red Blacks are putting together. We just don't know. He left his first year in Ottawa, didn't last a game. So basically, there's not much we do know. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all because I can't. I have no evidence that he's a big asset for Ottawa, but I have faith in his ability, and knowing how good a guy, quarterback he can be, as he was in Hamilton, and I'm sure with a team like Ottawa, he can do something. I definitely know, and again, this sounds a slight of Arbuckle, but I do know that he has the ability to perform better than what we saw in Game 1 for the Ottawa Red Blacks.
And just going back to Arbuckle here for a second too, like Bob Dice I was reading today, he wants Nick Arbuckle to do a couple things. One, don't turn the ball over on first down.
No
Right?
kidding.
Like turnovers are like, if there's one thing that kills a team more in the CFL, it's turnovers. Turnovers, shortened fields, it gives offenses just that extra possession. You got to make use of every single one. And also let your playmakers do a little more of the playmaking. Don't try to force things. As you said, there were a few throws that he sailed completely off, right? You have to give your playmakers a chance. And
Absolutely.
I think that's gonna be crucial. And I
There was
also
more than 30 seconds left in the game.
yeah. Right?
So yeah, I look at it. If you have more than 30 seconds left in the game, make a throw. Make it happen. Absolutely, push the defense. That's great, but there was no necessity for what he did in that game.
Oh, and you know what? Like Bob Dice still said, like I said he was going to play the first 2 games. He will. Whether he finishes those 2 games, I'm very curious. When I was in Guelph watching this Red Blacks team, they had Tyree Adams in at quarterback.
It's pretty
Let's
good.
say someone that's willing to use his legs to make plays if there isn't one to be made through the air. That could be something that they look to. If Arbuckle struggles, they could look to make a change there. He was doing some practice with the first team, even though Arbuckle was named the starter. I think it's going to be a short leash. I don't, as much as they want to throw their support behind Arbuckle, they're not married to him, right? Like he's not the guy for the season, so I don't think they'll be too hesitant to pull him if this is going to be another occurrence in their next game.
Yeah, I think that a good segue for what you just said right there. If we look around the Canadian Football League, and there is a shrinking amount of sit in your pocket quarterbacks. You
Mhm.
know, in the next game we'll talk about is Saskatchewan 17-13 over Edmonton. What we saw was Trevor Harris in that game run for about 20 yards. He's a sit back in the pocket guy, but even he knows more and more now in his career. Even though he's getting older, he runs a little bit more than he did, earlier in his career, and I think that's essentially the direction the quarterback position has been going since people like Harris and Mazzoli and Caleros coming into the league. If you look at all of them, most quarterbacks are mobile. The Bo Levi Mitchell type of quarterback, and the previous version, if I can refer to Harris's previous style of staying in the pocket, is one that doesn't stand an offense well. And I think the reason that is, David, is because offensive lines are severely undermatched against defensive lines in the Canadian Football League, as a rule. Not, generally speaking, I guess, as a rule. And when it doesn't happen, that's just confirming the rule. So that's if we saw what we saw from Harris in Saskatchewan, was that he's the same guy that's a high percentage thrower. Another game where a team jumps out to a quick start and the defense clamps down enough to win.
Yeah, no, for sure, and we're. It feels like that's going to be a little bit of a theme this year for a lot of teams that want their defense to shine a little bit more. Like like some teams that especially that might be offensively challenged don't have the high powered offense. Get enough for our defense to hold it down for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. In this game, another one, the merry-go-round that is the Canadian Football League and quarterbacks. We we have a lot of quarterbacks that have moved. How would you judge Harris playing for Saskatchewan in Game 1?
I'm sure he would have expected better of himself in this game. It was nice to see him and him and Darrell Walker connect for a touchdown. That was nice to see. I'm sure Darrell Walker wanted to show up against his former team too. I just think like we've always known Trevor Harris as the guy who's efficient, right? 20 for 33, I would consider that not Trevor Harris like. Throwing 2 interceptions, not very Trevor Harris like. But I give Saskatchewan credit because they also got the running game going. That was something that they wanted to do. They wanted to be a little more proactive in that regard, but also keeping the quarterback upright too. I think allowing 2 sacks, Saskatchewan Roughriders fans were probably more happy about that than the win.
No kidding.
So I
No
think
kidding.
I think that was probably more crucial for Saskatchewan, knowing that they. I mean, I know that Harris took a little bit of a bump at the end of the game, and people are a little concerned if that's going to be something they'll have to monitor. But yeah, I think the fact that if this is the rust or not even rust, but like Trevor Harris missed some time in training camp while he was attending the birth of another child.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's going to be a little bit of a little bit of time to get things going. But I mean, Saskatchewan's defense that's going to be their saving grace in a lot of ways. If the offense is, the thing about Trevor Harris, if your defense gives you a chance, you'll find a way to get the win. And I think that's something that Saskatchewan can offer him.
I was impressed with the goal line stand by the Riders. That very
Oh,
end, the defense,
yeah.
very key. But
Oh,
one thing that we saw as well was that Edmonton's going to be okay at quarterback. Just experience. 3 years is pretty much when quarterbacks begin to that join the Canadian Football League, that have a chance to show that what they've learned and what they've worked towards. Still mentally, he has a little bit of an issue. And Edmonton, well, I think the receivers they have, I mean, they have some really good receivers, so they can help him. So that receiving corps can help them at quarterback position.
I'm a little more bullish with Edmonton just because, yeah, Taylor Cornelius. I didn't think
Mobility,
his mobility's good. That's something that gives him, he can extend plays.
big.
He's got that ace in a hole on Eugene Lewis. Like the thing I loved, they were amazing. Like the connection there, undeniable. 99-yard touch. I think 99-yard touchdown.
Yep.
What an amazing catch. That's something that Cornelius, I think, a confidence boost to know if he throws one up and his receiver can make a play. That's a confidence boost for any quarterback. Problem I had is Eugene Lewis had almost 158 yards. He had 148 yards receiving. Taylor Cornelius threw for 202 yards.
Who else was out there?
Right? This is something that you're going to have to get your other guys going. Emmanuel Arsenault, got to be better. Dunbar, one catch for
That was
yards.
that he had a lot more targets than he had catches for sure.
Yeah. So
He was targeted.
if I'm Edmonton, the other issue too is penalties. Again, with the
Yes.
penalties, a Chris Jones specialty with penalties, unfortunately. But yeah, I know. Like, if you want to show that you are ready to take that next step, and I feel bad for the fans because there were a lot of fans there in Edmonton. I think there was close to 35,000 or well over that in attendance at this game. But you got, I think, 32,000 was the announced crowd. That's really good for an
A real
Edmonton
good crowd.
home opener.
Well, where they're coming from too, right?
largest since 2013. Also had to deal with the fact that this game might not have happened because of the air quality issues that
Mm.
they're having in Alberta right now. But if I'm Edmonton right now, a couple of things that I'm looking to fix: get your other receivers going. You got to get Arsenal. You got to get Dunbar more involved because Eugene Lewis can do a lot. He can't do everything.
Yeah, they definitely didn't hit the ground running when it came to the run game either. And their offense really needs to generate more. Their defense was more than acceptable. I think their defense did a great job. Um, as far as I'm concerned, Saskatchewan and Edmonton are the two teams in the West that didn't make the playoffs. This was a game to basically help build up the confidence for a good season. And what happens every year, you when you lose the first game, it can get terrible. Like you feel like you're getting behind the. I know it's an 18 game schedule, but still, you don't want to lose early. You want to build some momentum early. It's much better. And so Saskatchewan has that momentum to think about, to play for, in the hopes of making the playoffs in a really tough division. Which, if you go by the games this week, the way Calgary played, maybe it isn't as tough a division as we all think it should be.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting juggle because I feel like just by looking at week one, it's Winnipeg, BC. Whoever else is behind, there's going to be a fight for that third spot. I
There is.
can't for the life of me really nail down who I think will win that third job. And Calgary, if they get their
Well, Calgary dropped in my eyes in that game.
yeah,
They need to play better if they want to make the
Calgary needs to
playoffs.
play better. Saskatchewan was good, but is that good enough?
They still got stuff to prove.
And Edmonton, they're like, if they can get more receivers involved, if they can get more guys on offense to pick things up, I think that defense can be good enough to win. It's just, can that offense be good enough to win? So it's a lot. Every one of those teams, in that division outside of Winnipeg and BC have question marks, and question marks you don't want to see right now, but question marks that can be fixed. I think that's the important one.
Absolutely. In our final game, Hamilton and Winnipeg, the score was 42-31. And I think, by my calculation, I think Winnipeg scored about 60 of those points.
I
I mean, I've never seen Winnipeg play so well and then play so badly. And no offense to Hamilton, but a lot of those points that Hamilton got, they deserved them. They earned their defense, took advantage of opportunities. But those were pretty much, here's 7 points. How would you like them?
Yeah, I mean the punt block. That's a give me because somebody didn't do their job on special teams, right? Like
The
that's one.
handoff, the handoff.
Yep, the handoff too. Like those are just plays that can cost you.
They looked like preseason plays.
Look
We
like
saw we saw two Winnipeg teams. The Winnipeg team that we're all accustomed to seeing in midseason form, all of a sudden turned into the Winnipeg team that's playing a preseason game, and half the team are rookies.
no, exactly, and I do think that with Winnipeg, the worst enemy right now is going to be themselves, because teams are going to find a way to try to beat Winnipeg, and Winnipeg is going to have to find a way to not beat themselves, because that's what they did almost to themselves in the Grey Cup, right?
Absolutely.
They played well in the Grey Cup, but then they made some really eye eye twitching plays, like going for a deep shot when you have your backup quarterback into the game that leads to an easy interception. You know, certain plays, moments, key moments of the game. And I think the good thing is that your offense is, that's an offense I don't want to go up against at
Yeah.
all. But Michael Shea, him, he's not I think he's realized, oh, this is something that we're gonna have to nip in the butt right now, and he will.
Maybe, the other thing, because what you said there just triggered something in my head, is that maybe it was too early for them to do some razzle dazzle plays like the fake handoff.
Yep.
They weren't ready for it, and That's something I think they can fix. Winnipeg can fix that. But I do think that Hamilton has always been and will always be an opportunistic team. That's what they do. They're ball hawks. They historically it's what the fans love. That this is a team, Hamilton, that makes plays out of nothing, whether it be on defense, whether it be on offense. We literally saw Hamilton at their best and at their worst. In that game, and I give them full credit for making the comeback. As much as we're talking about mistakes that Winnipeg made, those mistakes, that handoff that basically got knocked off in a scoop and score was because the Hamilton defensive line penetrated into the backfield of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So it was a positive thing that they did. I don't want to make this sound like Hamilton was very lucky. They weren't lucky. They were opportunistic, but they did get the door open to crack by Winnipeg, and they came close. They were only one score behind. They got to one score behind after how far behind they were. They really did a great job of doing that. Special teams, and they did it with every phase of football. They did it with the special team, defense, offense. It was done by everybody. So we know that Hamilton can be a threat.
Yeah, I think when you look at with Hamilton, yeah, they're probably a lot of them were ready to just turn the game off in that first half.
I don't know how many Hamilton fans saw the second half.
Yeah, I think you got to have a lot of faith in the fact you got to like what they did in that second half. But here's the thing: when a team like Winnipeg is up so much, it's very very easy to let the foot off the gas and give that little opening, right? We mentioned it. I want to see first off Hamilton going down 29-4. Not ideal. I think it was at one
Not
point
at all.
32. Like this was like just a terrible first. Like I was looking at Orlando Steinauer talking with why am I blanking on the reporter's name for out of Winnipeg? Used to be the Munch. I'll think about it in a second here. But
Oh, so,
John Lou
yeah,
talking to
yeah,
John Lou in the after coming out of the first half. This looked like a coach that gave it to his team,
yeah.
like big time, just not good enough. Like flat out, not good enough. He said it. We're not saying it. He's the coach is saying it. And so I think this is I think maybe a little bit of a wake up call, right? I think I was saying that this first game was going to be it's a good measuring stick game if you're Hamilton to know how good are you really? Because a lot of people are saying this roster as constructed looks like a championship team, but the mistakes that they were making, especially in the first half, the penalties, I'm sure you saw the belly flop, the dive out of nowhere, and players. We talked about last year with the Argos fighting each other on the sidelines. We had Tiger Cats players fighting each other on the field.
Yeah.
Jagger Davis trying to get his players to get in line, and like that's something I think that Orlando saw, and you know what? In a lot of ways, I think he's hoping. You know what? It's good we got this out of the way in the first game rather than later in the season and letting frustration boil over. I think there's expectation. There's pressure on this team. That first game showed that a little bit. I think it also showed that once they settle down, once they get themselves into the game a little bit better, they can be a good team. But offensively, the one that concerns me is Tim White has to be the guy. It looks like. That's asking a lot of Tim White, in my opinion, especially with Bolievi Mitchell. I think they're gonna have to find somebody else to add a little more. I'll add a little more of the playmaking ability, in that receiving core. Because like expecting Duke Williams to do it, that's asking a lot, in my opinion. They got to find somebody else to help Tim White out because he looked like a receiver that was a little overwhelmed in this game. Just not on the same page with his quarterback at all until the second half.
Yeah, and then here we go with the learning curve thing again. New quarterback. You know, I wasn't surprised that Hamilton signed him. The moment that word came out, I knew that he was going to Hamilton, and I say it about then because I want to say this now. Hamilton is a great home for second lives. Historically, they've been one of the best organizations that have embraced great quarterbacks from other teams who continue and have a second legacy, which is what Bo Levi wants to have in Hamilton. He wants to have that same second legacy that a lot of other quarterbacks have had historically in Hamilton. We've seen it before, and we can see it again. There's the great thing about it is that there's one thing that suits Bo Levi Mitchell being in Hamilton. Both he and the team are looking for Back to the Future history. you know, Great play that both of them have had in the past, in the recent past, who want to return to that. And I think both can contribute to that. It's going to be interesting. My only negative when it came to Bo Levi Mitchell is a negative I would have anywhere, is that when you pay a quarterback as much as they're paying Bo Levi Mitchell, you have to get that money from somewhere else unless you're okay with paying fines for going cap overruns. So that's the issue with that we saw with Riley and BC, and it's something that could happen in Hamilton. Uh, and we'll see. We'll see if they can massage the cap to the point where they can afford to protect their asset that they feel is so worthwhile in that at the price point that they've taken him in at.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. They're paying him to be an elite quarterback, and I
The
didn't.
most elite quarterback in the Canadian Football League.
I hate to see it, but this is not an elite quarterback. In my like, can he be that elite quarterback? Like, look, it's one game. He didn't play a lot. You know, I think that when you look at the um where the CFL is going with quarterback play, like Zach Claros is the gold standard. He's the
Usually is.
measuring stick if you want to say elite quarterback. And I haven't seen a quarterback out of those games we just watched in week one. Nobody was even at the level. I mean, sorry, Vernon Adams was there. Vernon Adams and Zach Claros, two guys that I could say were the reasons why their teams won. I look at the other games, their quarterbacks did, the ones that won, the quarterbacks did enough, but not enough to, I think, really, if their defenses weren't good, the game could have gone either way. So I look at Hamilton. You got to ask more to Bo Levi Mitchell at some point. Maybe it's a little early to expect it.
One touchdown, two interceptions is not a stat that, this is
No,
one that I've grown to, over the past few years. I have found that quarterbacks are throwing a lot, Canadian Football League quarterbacks are throwing a lot of interceptions.
right? And defenses can offenses in the CFL take time to really get things.
Absolutely.
Defenses are going to get the better of them in the early going. But if you look at this game between Hamilton and Winnipeg, like this is you can see what happens when a defense is at its when an offense is at its best. When you saw what Winnipeg did, so I'm very it's very interesting to see which other team in the league other than BC and Winnipeg are going to have offenses that can go full throttle right at the start, right? Like at some point, I expect Hamilton to be a little bit better offensively, but how long is too long to wait for that?
That is the major question. How long is too long?
Mm-hmm.
But in essence, though, game one. What do you get out of game one? What kind of call can you make? Out of game one. Well, we have a hint of the way things are, not necessarily the way they'll be. We got a great indication of the quarterbacks on the move have brought their abilities to the teams that they went to. We saw a hint of it with Bo Levi. He made some really nice throws. And let's not forget, David, he didn't play much towards the end of last year. As far as exhibition and preseason is concerned, they don't use their number one quarterbacks that much. He came in for a couple of plays and out again. So game one, I wouldn't be so set on making determinations about the quarterbacking skills. And you're 100% right. I was thinking that when you were saying it, talking about the defenses. Offenses take a little longer to get going, and now offenses with new leaders even take a little bit longer again. So it's exponentially more difficult to get off to a quick start. What we saw the quarterbacks like Caleros that have been with the team for a while in the offense get out of the gate quickly. We saw that. We saw Adams do it, who was with the team last year in BC. So that kind of stuff we're accustomed to. But I can't wait to see what happens down the road. We've got a game coming up with Hamilton and Toronto. We can't not talk about that game. And this is a message for the producer. We're going to the full 50, so we have another 4 minutes left in the show, and we'll cut out after that. We can talk now about the Hamilton Toronto rivalry, where Toronto, once again, their fans, in the in, amidst the calls of Argo suck, hang up another banner to celebrate another Grey Cup championship. Um, Once again, in front of Hamilton Tiger Cat fans and their team.
Yeah, the anticipation is building a little bit. We see what happened the last time the Argos opened as a championship team against against the Hamilton Tiger Cats at home. It'll be nice to see the banner raising. It'll give a nice little, reminder to the Hamilton Tiger Cats fans that the team has not been able to accomplish that in a little while. But what concerns me here is Hamilton sees this, the Tiger Cats see this and say, all right, this team, like this Argos team, might take us for granted a little bit here. And we can get off to a good start. I think if you're the Argos, like hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to them this week in practice. But the big one for me here is establishing your championship pedigree right off the hop. You're coming in as a champion, you got a target on your back, but also make other teams realize why you have that target on your back. They did that. I'll give them credit. They did do that in that last exhibition game in Guelph. Just a great drive down the field to lead to a touchdown. It was the only, like, Chad Kelly didn't play a lot in that first quarter. Like, he only really played the first quarter in that one exhibition game, so we didn't get to see a lot of him. But there's been a lot of question marks about whether this Argos team can be a contender again. Can Chad Kelly lead them as a starting quarterback? I'm looking to see how much they're going to look to prove that right off the hop.
They've got a couple of things that I think are important. Locker rooms and the players within them individual players can have a large impact on the group. With Peters coming back, I think that'll have a very positive effect on the team, and the desire and effectiveness of a Winton McManus is something that I think is his wanting to be an impact again, and I know how sad he was when he didn't get to play in the Grey Cup. It was I really my heart went out to the guy, how upset he was and how much it meant to him, and negatively that he didn't get a chance to play. He gets a chance to redo that. So hopefully for him that'll happen.
Yeah, and I don't mind that at all. Like, I think you have to be able to show that you have to be able to show it, right? And give the opportunity to show it too. I think that's
this is an emotional team. We saw this team last year was very emotional, and they drive themselves emotionally, and it's no coincidence that they have a very emotional president in Pinball Lemon.
Can be a very emotional person.
They're a very emotional team.
Wamba can be very emotional.
Absolutely.
I would say Andrew Harris, to a degree,
intense. His intensity overcomes the emotion a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of savviness. I will say savviness on this team.
Totally.
A really, you look at a nice blend of young and old on this team too, right? Like they got a lot of veterans on this team, but they are able to bring these young guys in a way that I like. I see the way that they were interacting. I just see, even off the field, just see how they interact. This is a group that doesn't leave anyone behind. There's no one that's left to feel like they're kind of on their own on this team. That's because of the veterans realize, that have been in that position before and know what they need to do to bring everybody up to their level. So that's a crucial thing for the Argos going into this season.
Yeah, their favorite phrase, each and every one of the players, the favorite phrase that comes off their lips is, "I appreciate you." And that's something that speaks to the cohesiveness of the team, the brotherhood, the family, all that stuff. But more importantly too, well, not more importantly, importantly as well, is we've got a young quarterback that we're watching who's going to have an opportunity to build on a Grey Cup win that he was a big part of. Chad Kelly was a big part of that victory. And now he gets a chance to see what he can do game in, game out. And the good news, I think, for him is that cohesiveness that a team like the Argos have. They're going to get a beautiful chance to prove it. They're going to help raise this quarterback, that receiving core, that offense, that offensive line. They all, in character, because of the way the team's built under Pinball Clemens and coached by Ryan Dinwiddie, they'll go through fire for each other, and they know that this young quarterback has a lot to prove, and has, he's the guy at the controls of this Grey Cup defending team. So we're going to see if they. I don't think they'll come up flat. I mean, it could happen. They could come up flat, but we're going to find out what this team's made of in game one, in as far as being ready for a challenge from game one, and that's what we'll find out. It's funny you brought up the point of last time they won a championship in their first game back, they did come up flat. I don't know if this is the same kind of organization and team that will allow that to happen. The players within it, I mean.
Yeah, no, it's true, and that's kind of by design a little bit by the Argos too, right? Like this is something that they wanted, so be interesting to see how it plays out. I think you know Ryan Dinwiddie. I think as a coach, the good thing about him is he's very level headed. He's always looking for ways to be better. So I think he'll definitely keep this team in. As long as he can keep the team together and on the same path, I think they'll be all right.
I'm going to make that the last word of the show today, David. Great final words and great contribution to the show today.
Appreciate it.
We have our regrets that we couldn't get. Bubba Smith couldn't show up. Maybe we'll get him back some other time. Hope everything's okay with him. That's the most important thing. Thanks for doing this, David Morassutti.
Thank you, Frank.
For David, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk. Airing live on Mondays at 9 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And don't forget to subscribe to Candid Frank Stanisci 1030 and watch all the shows that we do here. Thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time.